experientially those states are very, very real.
So everyone contains in oneself all that. How do you say? From hell to heaven. No?
Yes. But in many of the esoteric system, there is a concept that the human being is a microcosm that contains the whole universe, all of existence. As above, so below, or as without, so within. You find it in
That's
Tantra, you find
yes.
it in the Gnostic system, you find it in Kabbalah, that in a sense, experientially we have access to not only to anything in this reality, but also to the supernal realms and to the infernal realms. And the work with non-ordinary states, the consciousness research that we have done is a very interesting confirmation of that. And we even have a way of approaching it scientifically in a somewhat different way with the holographic system, where every part can contain the whole. It's an entirely different way of looking at the relationship between the part and the whole, which we didn't have before. So we talked so far about the ensouled universe, about the immanent divine, and about this sort of world of archetypal figures and archetypal realms. Now when people have the experiences of these deities and these demons, again, they can be overpowered emotionally in a positive or a negative way, but again they don't have the feeling that they arrived. It is still not the ultimate.
And when does a person have the feeling?
Yeah, so I specifically looked at the parts of people's experiences where they actually have the sense that they encounter the ultimate. And I found two types of experiences that seem to meet somehow that requirement. The first one is very interesting because it is an experience of emptiness, what's called void in the spiritual literature. Not just any kind of emptiness, some people just feel empty-headed, or they don't have initiative, or don't feel any feelings and so on. That's not the void. The void is a very specific kind of emptiness where you have a sense that this is a kind of primordial cosmic nothingness, that there's nothing concrete present, but there's also nothing missing. Everything is there in a potential form.
That's
it carries somehow the seeds for all of creation. And we have a similar concept in modern physics these days. They talk about the dynamic vacuum. In high energy physics you can create particles out of this nothingness.
Of nothingness. Yeah. So Stan, it's one more time when physics and spirituality get to the same point.
But there's also a difference, because for the physicists the dynamic vacuum is just the source of particles, which is the building blocks for the material world, whereas this void I'm talking about contains all of creation, which would include the forms, the patterns, the order. You see, not just the fundamental building blocks, or even the logos, the idea for creation, or the ideas for creation.
The form, the thoughts, consciousness, everything, creativity, all the principles.
Yes, all of existence in all its aspects sort of emerges out of this void. And the void transcends any polarities. It's beyond good and evil, or masculine, feminine, agony, ecstasy, and so on. So that's one kind of experience where people have a sense, this is the source of creation. Somehow out of this emptiness, creation emerges, and they have experiential sense of how it can happen without a feeling of absurdity that something is emerging out of nothing. They don't resolve it intellectually, logically, but they understand it sort of experientially. And the other experience that also serves that function is very different. It's an experience of the divine as this enormous source of light. But when people use that term light, they usually apologize. They say, to call it light is the closest thing I can do. But it's really much more than light. It's also absolute consciousness. There is infinite intelligence, creativity there. And when they perceive it, they say, you know, it's like the cosmic sun, but it's like incomprehensible radiance. They talk about millions of suns, and even that is enough.
Incredible.
Now, when they have this experience, and I should say we have, because I had that experience myself, and it's very clear that this is where creation comes from. This is the author. This is the source of creation, and it's also clear that what is being created, what the source can create, is experiences. You see from that perspective that all realities, whether it is the archetypal reality or whether it's the world we live in, is primarily made of experiences. We will understand it 20 years from now, where we have good virtual reality. We can understand how you can experience worlds that are not there, just from orchestration of experiences. So that the insight that you have when you have that experience is that the world we live in is an illusion. It's a cosmic movie made of experiences. The Hindus talk about Lila. This is a divine play, and they call this illusion of the world Maya. They have specific terminology for that.
But Stan, it's like a place you can touch seldom, no? Just a few times for all of us.
Yes.
I mean, or for,
yes.
we are still.
Even if you do work systematically with non-ordinary state, it's not.
It's just a point you touch and then you come back. You can't like. Perhaps it's where we tend to, no?
Well, it dramatically changes your experience of the world, even in everyday life. But that's much more subtle. I mean, you don't lose the memory and a certain degree of awareness of the divine nature of reality. But when you have a full-blown experience, it would be very difficult to function in that state. It's so consuming, in a sense. So there's another question that people ask when there is this kind of experience, and that is, why does creation happen? Because many of the religions tell us this is a kind of a low level, garbage level. This is, whatever you call it, the valley of tears, the quagmire of death, rebirth, and the idea is you want to go somewhere else into some transcendental states, and one of those ultimate states would be go back into the undifferentiated unity, to experience oneness with the divine. But then when you have the experience, you see that that experience cannot be completely self-fulfilling, because all these other levels would not exist. So somehow the divine has a certain need to create. And so people ask that question, what are the quote-unquote motives for creation? Why, when that state is so fantastic, why is not the divine satisfied just staying in that undifferentiated primordial state? Why does it have to create something else? And there's a variety of answers that people give. One of them, for example, is that the source is so rich, so full, so abundant, so overflowing with creativity that it simply has to give it out. It has to create, like an artist on our level, can be pregnant with
creativity
with some kind of work of art or work of music, and there's a tremendous tension to express that. Very frequently you hear about curiosity, that somehow the divine wants to get to know itself. It has all this enormous potential and wants to get to know itself, its true nature. And the only way it can be done is to create the dichotomy of the observer and the observed, something tangible that has to be sort of projected on the outside. It is interesting that you find it also in medieval Kabbalistic texts, that one of the motives for creation of the world was that God wanted to see God. They actually say face wanted to see face with a capital F. Many people talk about this creation being a fantastic experiment also. Sometimes people find that actually the divine is missing something, that it's not because it's just overflowing with abundance, but that it's in the pristine state there's something missing that it's seeking in creation. So for example, one of the potentials would be loneliness, that as fantastic as that experience is, there is only one subject, and there's a sort of awareness of being alone. Usually when people talk about it, when they say loneliness, they capitalize it. It's not like when you and I feel lonely. It has cosmic dimensions, longing, sort of loneliness. And from that perspective, creation would be seen as something that overcomes this loneliness, creates sort of number of separate individuals who can relate and give and receive love. So it's a way of the divine to
it's
give
like
and receive
the 2
love
points.
and relate and communicate. Another thing that you hear is that somehow in creation the divine is seeking something that it isn't and that it doesn't have. It's kind of ethereal, it's ephemeral, it's eternal, it's infinite, so that it's longing for something that's tangible, that is concrete, which is the experience of the material world. I have in my book a picture from an Aztec codex which shows 2 deities in a kind of complementary dance, and one of those deities is Quetzalcoatl, representing the spirit, the feathered serpent, and the other one is Tezcatlipoca, or also smoking mirror, who represents matter. So it's like a complementary dance between spirit and matter. So those are very, very interesting insights that people have, very convincing insight when you are in that state. So you get a sense that somehow this level fulfills a very important function for the divine, that it is a necessary
complementation.
It's a necessary complement. Then people ask also a question, not why creation, but how is it done? I already mentioned that it would be virtual reality, it would be made of experiences. But then people typically mention 2 mechanisms that kind of again are intertwined, combined. One of them is a sequence of divisions, multiple divisions, where something that was one and undifferentiated, united, becomes many, and also on different levels. So one level would be the archetypal level, another level would be the physical world. But it's basically this movement from one to many, to a world of plurality, and also a world of increasing density. The experience would be denser and denser. And the other mechanism that combines with it, sometimes it's called something like partitioning, screen work, but other people prefer psychological terms like forgetting or dissociation, divine forgetting. These units of consciousness forget where they came from. They lose their connection to the source, and they also lose the awareness of their identity with each other. They start experiencing themselves as absolutely separate, autonomous units. And then through this complex system of divisions and separations, then the divine creates these worlds. But that, from this perspective, from these insights, represents only 1/2 of creation. The other half of creation would be a system of mechanisms that actually dissolve boundaries that make it possible to return again to the
source.
Original undifferentiated state. And those are actually these states that we studied. The non-ordinary states of consciousness are states in which the boundaries dissolve to different degrees, and we experience somehow the journey back. So Abraham Maslow described what he called peak experiences, when we can be, for example, in beautiful nature, going on a raft down the Grand Canyon, and we're looking up and we're overwhelmed by the beauty, and suddenly the boundaries are dissolving and we cannot tell the difference between us and the rocks, and us and the Colorado River, and us and the sky, and we have that experience of oneness. Women experience it around childbirth and taking care of their children, experience oneness with children. In good lovemaking, the partners can experience being one with each other and also merging with a higher source, spiritual source.